The alien Colosseum roared with anticipation, a sea of metallic structures and vibrating banners that shimmered beneath a sky painted by 3 suns. The stands overflowed with thousands of species, each eager to see another contest of strength and blood. They had gathered to watch yet another display of dominance by their best troops, creatures bred and forged for war, towering giants whose armor alone weighed more than the body of the fragile human who had been selected to stand among them. The crowd's laughter rose like a wave the moment his name was announced. To them, Earth's presence here was nothing more than a cosmic jest. The alien warriors themselves radiated arrogance. Their bodies glistened with scales, tusks, and armored hides. Every one of them was a monument to biological perfection sculpted for violence. They carried weapons crackling with plasma, energy blades humming at their sides, and stood twice the height of their human challenger. Their language carried an undertone of sneer and disbelief. They spoke loudly enough that the human could hear, though he gave no sign that he did. "He looks like a child," one growled, his mandibles clacking in amusement. "A weakling mammal dragged from some backwater dirt," another added, voice thick with mockery. "We should have demanded a predator at least, something worthy of our blades." Their laughter spread until it seemed to shake the Colosseum walls. Yet the human stood motionless at the gate, no flourish, no response, only calm eyes surveying the arena. He carried no elaborate weapon. Only a simple combat blade hung at his side, crude compared to the alien steel that gleamed all around. To the onlookers, it was laughable, an insult to the ceremony of war. The commanders of the alien forces sat in high thrones above the arena, observing with bored expressions. To them, this trial was nothing more than entertainment. Humans had been contacted recently, and though they had shown potential for trade, no one had taken their warriors seriously. They lacked size, lacked armor, lacked the terrifying biochemistry that made other species natural soldiers. Why, then, had Earth dared to send one of its own into this sacred competition? The commanders leaned back, ready to watch the brief humiliation that would confirm their assumptions. The human adjusted his grip on the leather strap securing his blade. His posture was unremarkable, shoulders relaxed, stance loose, no grand display of intimidation. Some in the crowd mistook it for cowardice. The jeering intensified, alien voices calling him prey, weak flesh, soft bones ready to crack. The insults cut through the air, yet his expression did not change. If the noise reached him at all, he gave no sign. His silence unsettled those few who were perceptive enough to notice. A younger alien soldier spat toward the dirt. "He doesn't even snarl. He accepts death already." But others were less certain. One elder warrior, seasoned from countless battles, narrowed his eyes. He recognized something not in the human's body, but in his eyes, the absence of fear. Many species displayed bravado, roared to hide nerves, or boasted to disguise trembling hands. This human gave nothing. He seemed to measure everything before him, studying the ground, the stands, the weapons, even the sunlight. He looked like a predator preparing to move, not one trying to impress, but one intent on surviving. Still, the chorus of mockery drowned such doubts. The grand announcer's voice boomed across the Colosseum, calling the crowd to witness the futility of Earth's champion. The warriors pounded their weapons against their armor, thunderous and mocking, shaking the very floor. The human merely inhaled deeply, shoulders steady, calm as though he were back in a training yard rather than standing at the threshold of a battlefield where death was a near certainty. In that calmness lay something the aliens did not yet understand. Humanity had survived ice ages, plagues, and predators not by being the largest or strongest, but by enduring and adapting. Those instincts were etched into this man's every breath, though the crowd could not yet see it. All they saw was a fragile creature waiting to be shattered for their amusement. The gates creaked as the machinery began to rise. The alien troops laughed one final time, slapping each other's armored backs, certain they were about to watch a brief and pitiful struggle. The air quivered with expectation, the 3 suns blazing like spotlights on the sandy floor of the arena. The human stepped forward into the light, no fanfare, no noise, his face unreadable. The Colosseum jeered louder than ever, but for the first time, a handful of alien officers fell quiet. They could not explain why, but there was something in the way the human carried himself that unsettled them. He looked not like prey being led to slaughter, but like a fighter who had already calculated what must be done. The mockery thundered on, yet in that silence within his mind, the human waited. And while the galaxy believed it was about to witness comedy, Earth's warrior prepared for something else entirely. The Colosseum thundered as the gates clanged open, the arena revealed in its full immensity. Spanning nearly a mile across, the battleground was built to showcase the might of alien warriors, not the frailty of an Earth-born fighter. Jagged outcrops of stone jutted through the sands, their edges sharpened by centuries of deliberate design to spill blood and trap the unwary. High walls loomed around the ring, amplifying every cheer, every hiss, every jeer that poured from the packed galleries above. Alien banners writhed in the heat, metallic cloth catching the suns and casting colors across the combat ground. The human stepped into this cauldron of hostility without fanfare, his boots pressing into the warm sand. He moved without theatrics, his body carrying only what was necessary. No armor shone on his chest, no powered gauntlets hummed at his wrists. His only companion was a simple blade, sheathed at his hip, its steel plain and dull beside the weapons wielded by those who waited for him. To the crowd, he appeared a lamb cast into a pit of predators, and they shrieked their scorn at his audacity. Alien commentators, their voices amplified by hovering drones, supplied the audience with cruel entertainment. They spoke of his frail frame, of Earth's laughable decision to send such a specimen into the trials. They ridiculed his silence, his refusal to answer their insults with defiance. "Even his voice trembles with shame," one snarled. "This will not last a minute." Laughter rolled across the arena like thunder, yet through it all, the human's calm expression never changed. The first of the alien champions moved forward, a towering brute encased in ceremonial plating that glowed faintly with energy fields. His weapon, a spear of obsidian laced with plasma veins, hissed as it was raised. Every movement radiated power. The crowd chanted his name in rhythm, a chant so loud it seemed to shake the dust from the arena floor. The human gave no sign of intimidation. His breathing remained steady, measured, as though he were already accustomed to hostile eyes boring into him. At the signal, the alien surged forward with terrifying speed, the ground shaking beneath his stride. The spear stabbed toward the human's chest, a killing blow intended to end the contest before it had truly begun. Gasps of anticipation surged through the audience, ready to laugh at the inevitable collapse of fragile bones. Instead, the human slipped aside, the spear carving only air. It was not a panic scramble but a movement precise and economical, born of muscle memory refined by endless repetition. The alien blinked, momentarily unsettled, before spinning for another strike. Again, the human did not meet strength with strength. He pivoted, keeping just outside the arc of the weapon, letting the alien's own momentum carry him past. Dust sprayed beneath the warrior's claws as he twisted to recover. From the stands came renewed laughter, but it had changed in tone. Some laughed at the human's evasions, calling it cowardice. Others narrowed their eyes, sensing something deliberate in his refusal to engage head-on. The champion struck again, each thrust heavier, faster, designed to crush this elusive prey. The human kept moving, using the terrain, keeping the stone outcrops at his back, never letting the alien fully corner him. The crowd's laughter grew mixed with irritation. They wanted blood, not this strange dance. Yet a few of the commanders leaned forward, their eyes catching how the human's gaze never left the alien's movements, studying, memorizing, waiting. The first unexpected success came suddenly. As the alien lunged, the human shifted his weight and let the spear crash against the jagged stone, snapping sparks across the arena. The force reverberated back into the warrior's arms, forcing him to stumble. The human did not strike yet, but his calm refusal to falter drew silence from portions of the crowd. They had expected fear. They saw patience. The alien champion snarled, enraged that this fragile creature dared prolong the match. He pounded his chest, roaring to regain the confidence of his audience, and charged once more. His strikes grew wilder, his precision unraveling beneath the steady, unflinching gaze of the human. What had begun as mockery now simmered into irritation. And irritation, as every seasoned soldier knew, was the crack from which defeat could spread. The human remained steady, breathing with the rhythm of survival, his movements sharp but never wasteful. His blade stayed sheathed, his restraint deliberate. He let the alien burn through his strength, let him swing harder, faster, until sweat glistened beneath his armor, and his breathing grew labored. The crowd shouted louder, desperate for a kill, but beneath their noise a new tension settled. The outcome was no longer as certain as it had been when the gates first opened. Dust swirled around them, the suns casting long shadows across the sand. The alien champion growled in frustration, his body heaving, while the human stood calm, patient, as if waiting for something only he could see. The first act of the trial was complete, though the crowd did not yet recognize it. The mocking had not silenced, but a subtle unease had begun to seep into the air. The frail creature had not fallen. He endured. And in endurance, he had already claimed the first piece of ground in a battle far larger than the Colosseum walls could contain. The alien champion tightened his grip, fury twisting his movements. He had expected to crush his opponent in a single stroke, yet the fragile human still stood untouched. The laughter of the crowd faltered, replaced by restless murmurs. Pride stung more sharply than pain, and the warrior lunged again, determined to finish what should have been effortless. His spear slashed through the air with enough force to shatter stone, but once more it struck only dust. The human shifted with minimal effort, turning just enough to let the attack pass harmlessly by. Each failed strike added weight to the alien's breathing, the rasp of exertion loud beneath his armor. The human, in contrast, breathed with quiet rhythm, conserving energy with each step. He had not once drawn his blade, though his hand brushed the hilt now and then, a reminder that patience was not passivity. He was waiting for the right moment, measuring the angles of each thrust, each recovery, cataloging them like a scholar memorizing lines of text. The alien's movements carried the confidence of one who had never known real challenge. His kind had conquered through brute force for generations, and every technique reflected the assumption that no foe could endure against their power. But here was an opponent who did not match strength against strength, who refused to be crushed by sheer momentum. It unsettled the crowd, and more importantly, it unsettled the warrior himself. The human strategy revealed itself gradually. He was not avoiding at random. Each step repositioned him where the alien's size became a hindrance, where his spear scraped stone, or where his weight slowed his recovery. He forced the warrior to exhaust his arms, his legs, his temper. Every miss carved away at composure, and in that slow erosion the human built his advantage. As dust swirled in the heated air, the human's mind reached beyond the arena. His movements carried echoes of his species' long struggle for survival. Where aliens had been born into strength, humanity had been born into danger. Teeth, claws, famine, and endless wars had tested them, and they had endured not because they were stronger but because they were relentless, clever, and unwilling to yield. Every evasion in this arena was rooted in that legacy. It was not cowardice. It was the same instinct that once led hunters to wear down prey over days, the same grit that had driven soldiers through fire and ruin. The alien roared in frustration and hurled his spear with bone-shaking force. The weapon missed, embedding deep into stone. In the heartbeat that followed, the human moved. Not with hesitation, not with panic, but with precision born from long calculation. He closed the distance in a burst, unsheathing his blade in a fluid motion. The plain steel caught the suns for an instant before striking the haft of the spear, forcing it deeper into the rock and snapping its shaft in two. The alien staggered back, stunned by the sudden shift from prey to predator. The crowd gasped, silence washing through the Colosseum like a sudden wind. No one had expected the human to act with such precision, nor to turn the alien's own weapon into a liability. The champion's face twisted, shock plain even across alien features. His weapon broken, his breathing ragged, he rushed forward with claws extended, abandoning form for rage. The human did not retreat. He met the charge not with brute force but with subtlety, redirecting the alien's momentum with small shifts, cutting shallow strikes across exposed joints. Blood spilled in fine arcs, each wound calculated not for show but for effect. The alien's roars grew hoarse as his body began to betray him, his movements heavier, slower, unbalanced. The human's blade moved with ruthless economy, never wasted, each motion further dismantling the opponent's confidence. The crowd no longer jeered. They leaned forward, caught between disbelief and awe. What had been entertainment was becoming revelation. The fragile creature they had mocked was displaying something alien to them, a refusal to yield, a calmness in the face of power, and an adaptability that turned disadvantage into strength. The champion stumbled, his knees shaking beneath the weight of his own fury and fatigue. He lashed out wildly, only to be punished by another quick strike, another step that forced him into error. He could not understand how the human still stood, how each wound he delivered to himself through carelessness seemed planned by his opponent. The decisive moment came with brutal simplicity. As the alien swung in desperation, the human sidestepped and drove his shoulder into the warrior's chest, unbalancing the giant. The plain blade slashed across an unarmored gap at the thigh, sending the warrior crashing to one knee. Dust erupted around him as the human stepped back, calm and steady, blade poised but not yet delivering the final blow. The arena was silent now. The laughter had died, replaced by an uneasy recognition. The alien who had been certain of victory now knelt in the dust, his pride shattered. And the human, small and unadorned, stood untouched, breathing steadily, watching with the eyes of one who had already won. What had begun as mockery had become something else entirely. Respect had not yet been spoken, but it hung in the air like a weight the entire Colosseum could feel. The human had turned the tide not with strength, but with patience, cunning, and relentless will, the very qualities that defined his species. And the galaxy, for the first time, began to understand why Earth's warrior had come. The alien's breathing grew ragged, his massive chest heaving with the strain of a fight he had expected to end in moments. Sweat mixed with blood across his armor, staining what had once gleamed with untouchable pride. The crowd that once shouted in cruel delight now sat restless, their voices uneven, some still jeering but others whispering in uneasy tones. They had never seen a champion pressed so far by something they considered weak. The human stood across from him, blade at his side, posture relaxed but ready, his eyes fixed on the faltering warrior. His calmness now seemed less like fear and more like control. The alien lunged with a snarl, throwing aside all remaining pretense of discipline. His claws slashed at the human with wild ferocity, each strike intended to rip flesh and end humiliation. Yet the human met the storm with ruthless composure. He no longer danced away as he had before but stepped in closer, slipping past the arcs of the claws, punishing each reckless attack with quick, cutting strikes. A slash across a forearm. A stab at the ribs. Every movement efficient, designed to drain strength and carved out deeper into the alien's mind. The crowd hissed and gasped as they watched their champion bleed from a dozen small wounds. These were not killing blows, not yet, but they were relentless. The human fought like someone who knew that breaking an enemy was not about a single strike but about stripping away will piece by piece. The alien stumbled, forced backward, and for the first time in his life he looked uncertain. His power was still immense, but his confidence, his greatest weapon, was unraveling before thousands of watching eyes. Narration filled the silence between gasps. Humans, it reminded them, were not the strongest or fastest among the galaxy's species. They did not bear claws, scales, or natural armor. What they carried instead was something far more dangerous, an instinct to endure and adapt no matter the cost. Pain was not their limit, it was their teacher. Where others broke, humans pushed harder. Where others yielded to exhaustion, humans clawed forward with bloodied hands. That instinct pulsed through every move of this warrior now, a truth no technology could replicate. The alien swung again, desperation plain in his movements, and his strike caught only air as the human slid past, carving another shallow wound. The warrior bellowed, more enraged than pain, but his strength was dwindling, his arms heavy, his vision blurred by fatigue. The human pressed harder, not giving him space to recover, each strike delivered with cold precision. There was no mercy in his eyes, no pause for honor. He fought to win, and that ruthlessness unnerved the crowd. They were used to contests of pride and spectacle, not this quiet, efficient dismantling. The alien commander in the high seat shifted uneasily, claws tapping the armrest. This was no longer the display they had intended. What had been meant to humiliate Earth was turning into a revelation of something far more dangerous: humanity's refusal to be broken. The laughter had died, and in its place grew the uneasy respect one reserves for predators. The champion sagged, his footing unsure, his strikes slower, each one a shadow of the confidence he had shown at the start. The human stepped forward with a fluid motion, his blade flashing across another weak point, forcing the giant to his knees once more. Dust clouded the air, and in that haze the human's figure seemed unshakable, his breathing still steady, his expression unreadable. He had bled his opponent of strength, of certainty, of pride, and now stood poised above him like the embodiment of inevitability. The alien raised his head, snarling through broken pride, and tried to surge upward again. But the human met him instantly, slamming a boot into the warrior's chest and forcing him back into the dirt. The blade pressed against his throat, steady and unyielding. The crowd froze, caught in a collective breath. This was not the ending they had imagined. The human did not deliver the strike yet. He held it there, blade sharp against flesh, his silence louder than any victory cry. He did not need to boast, did not need to shout. His very presence had already rewritten the outcome. The frail creature mocked as prey had revealed himself as something entirely different, relentless, calculating, ruthless when pressed, and unwilling to lose. The air hung heavy with realization. The alien had not been defeated by size or strength but by something he could never match: human tenacity. And though the fight was not yet finished, everyone watching knew the truth. The outcome was no longer in doubt. The blade lingered at the alien's throat, the silence in the Colosseum absolute. Every eye followed the human, waiting for a final strike that would end the contest. But he did not rush. His control was total, his breathing even, his hand steady. The champion beneath him strained to rise, but the weight of exhaustion chained his limbs, and the pressure of steel at his neck reminded him that the battle was already lost. For the first time, the crowd saw their strongest brought low not by brute force, but by the unyielding will of someone they had dismissed as insignificant. The alien let out a guttural growl, more despair than defiance, his pride cracking under the weight of the moment. The human's eyes never wavered. He pressed just enough to let blood bead at the surface, proof that mercy or death rested entirely in his decision. This calm authority struck harder than any blade. It was the posture of someone who had fought 1,000 unseen wars and understood victory was more than killing. It was breaking the spirit of the opponent until resistance no longer mattered. A single motion ended the suspense. With surgical precision, the human shifted his blade, slicing across a vulnerable tendon in the alien's shoulder. The champion collapsed fully, weaponless, powerless, unable to rise again. Gasps rippled across the Colosseum, the sound of disbelief colliding with awe. The fight was over, and the victor was not the towering beast adorned in armor but the unassuming human who now stood alone in the dust. For a heartbeat, there was nothing. No jeers, no laughter, not even whispers. The silence itself was an acknowledgement of what they had witnessed. Their certainty had crumbled. A species they had mocked had revealed something none of them had accounted for. Humanity was not strong because of muscle or technology, but because it refused to yield when every rational measure said it should. That stubbornness had carried this lone warrior through the trial, and now it had carved respect into the hearts of even the most arrogant. Slowly, murmurs rose from the stands. They were not jeers now but uneasy tones, voices grappling with what they had seen. Some spoke in grudging admiration, others in quiet fear. The commanders seated high above exchanged looks heavy with consequence. What had been intended as entertainment had become a warning. If one human could humble a champion in their own arena, what would entire armies of such creatures achieve when pressed to fight for survival? The human wiped his blade clean with deliberate calm, then sheathed it without flourish. He did not raise his arms in victory or shout to the crowd. His silence remained unbroken, a silence that spoke more loudly than any celebration could. It was the silence of certainty, of one who fought not for spectacle but because it was necessary. He gave no words to the defeated alien at his feet, no mockery in return. His presence alone was enough. The commander of the alien forces, a hardened veteran who had seen countless battles, finally rose from his throne. The audience stilled as his voice cut through the air, stripped of arrogance. He gave a warrior's salute, a gesture of respect rarely granted to outsiders. His tone held no mockery now. He spoke of skill, of resolve, of a lesson learned. And though he did not say it directly, the weight of his words admitted what the entire Colosseum now understood: humanity was not to be underestimated. The crowd followed reluctantly, their voices shifting from scorn to respect, some even offering chants in the human's honor. The transformation was undeniable. Moments ago, he had been prey in their eyes. Now he was a symbol of something raw and unsettling, something that challenged their assumptions about strength. The humans stood unshaken through it all, offering no acknowledgement of their change. He did not need it. His victory was not in their praise but in the truth now carved into their memory. As the defeated champion was carried away, the human turned toward the gates from which he had entered, walking with the same calm stride he had shown from the beginning. Behind him lay the silence of a humbled crowd, a silence that would spread through fleets and colonies, a silence that would echo as rumor and warning alike. They had mocked Earth's wildest warrior until he took the field. And in that moment, the galaxy learned that humanity's greatest weapon was not strength or size, but the will to endure until every enemy broke before them.